on your end there. So welcome everybody. I'm in my hotel room in Denver, Colorado, and appreciate the opportunity to be able to participate. So I want to introduce our guest today. Dr. Michelle Hubbard was born in San Diego as a Navy baby. She grew up in Elk City, Oklahoma on a horse farm. Michelle knew the way out of the horse barn was to go to college. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Central Oklahoma and went into teaching. She truly worked her way up from teaching to being an assistant principal to a principal. A large portion of her career progression was in the Turner School District, where she was involved in special education, along with coaching girls basketball and softball. During her tenure as principal of Turner High School, she had 5 kids. At one point, they were all 6 years old and under. So she had a 6U basketball team, if you can believe that. She knows all about being a mom. She took a short break to focus on her young children and came back into education as an elementary school principal. Michelle referred to this period of her career as the best learning experience of her life. Now she has direct exposure to kids entering public education and finishing their education. I learned a few key philosophies of Dr. Hubbard's from my chance to visit with her before the meeting. She really values the importance of relationships, particularly as it relates to being in a leadership position. She knows she can't get the job done alone. You must have great people around you, and they have to trust each other. It takes relationships to build that culture of trust. She knows that education, schools, and school districts drive communities, for better or for worse. Clearly, Dr. Hubbard is driven to build better communities through quality schools and education. To build that whole process, she wants to build engagement with businesses. So I mentioned that at one point she had 5 kids under 6. Well, now she has kids in 5 different colleges. She enjoys spending time with her family, so I'm sure that endeavor in itself is a logistical challenge. I welcome Dr. Michelle Hubbard.
What a wonderful introduction. Kevin, thank you so much for your sponsorship and for taking the time to join us from your hotel. We just are so pleased to have you with us today. And Michelle, we can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule to join us here, and more than anything for taking the job and this leadership opportunity here in Shawnee Mission School District. Michelle and I have some things in common. This animal print, for one, I have not been able to convince other speakers in the Fireside Chat Series to do the animal print. The mayor, who was our last speaker, he was very resistant to this, but thankfully Michelle was willing to do this. And my last chamber was actually on the campus of UCO because I came from Edmond. So we have a few things in common, although I have never had 5 children under the age of 6. So I am interested to hear a little bit more about the leadership lessons. So we're going to just dive right in, and I apologize for that feedback. We've had a few technical difficulties about which microphones are on, and so I apologize to the virtual audience for that, and to Kevin, who may or may not be able to hear everything that's happening while I'm speaking. So Michelle, let's just dive right in. Let's talk a little bit about your background. You know, talked about growing up in Oklahoma with Kevin, and growing up on a horse farm, and knowing about the importance of education and what that meant in your life. And so talk about those early lessons and how those were formative to helping you grow and develop and land where you are now.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm always excited to champion the Shawnee Mission School District every opportunity I have. So I'm excited to do that today. So I did grow up in Western Oklahoma in a fairly small town. And from the age of 10, I was raised by a single dad. So my dad worked really hard, and he instilled that in me. And he always told me that you can do anything you want to do if you're willing to work really hard, get an education, except for be president of the United States. And he said, and a female will not be president of the United States in your time. And I told him many, many years ago that I would beg to differ. So I'm still hopeful that at some point I can prove him wrong with that, but not me personally, but somebody could prove him wrong with that. But my dad was very inspirational for me. He's always been my biggest cheerleader. And then when I entered high school, he remarried, and my stepmom is a teacher. And she was always very inspirational for me. She never really pushed me to be a teacher, but she definitely had that encouraging piece. So work has always been something that I love. I don't see it as a job. I really have a passion for just staying busy and accomplishing things and building those relationships. So those are really the lessons early in life for me from Dad.
That's wonderful. So I would assume that his career in the Navy probably helped inform some of those things that he talked about. So were there some famous quotes of his, things that you heard that are kind of in the back of your head all the time?
So honestly, there's a lot of quotes from my dad. And as a matter of fact, we have a under the kitchen sink at he still lives in my home, my childhood home. And so under the kitchen sink, we have, his name is Harlan. We call them Harlanisms. I can't repeat them here though. He was a Navy dad and he spoke like a Navy dad. And so it's probably best for me not to do that. But
That's probably a different series.
It's probably a different series. He's very funny, very witty. You never know what's coming out, but it's usually not something I'm going to repeat, especially on camera.
That's awesome. Well, so I understand in addition to your stepmom, you had a special 9th grade teacher, and you had an opportunity to be an aide, and perhaps that was also formative to your desire to become a teacher. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So Mrs. Richardson was a special education teacher. In 9th grade for me was junior high. So, and I was in student council leadership at that time. And she was so inspirational for me. I was actually her aide for the student council work, but I found myself very connected to the work that she did with some really kids with really big challenges. And so there was a young lady in that classroom named Vivian, and I really connected with Vivian. I loved her, she loved me, and we had a connection all the way through high school. She was a special education student and really a pretty significant kiddo, but she was awesome. And so Mrs. Richardson really challenged her and pushed her, and I saw her grow as we went through high school. So it was really cool. That was really awesome for me. So Mrs. Richardson, who is still alive today, I still connect with her periodically. Sort of a unique story also in how I landed with her. My grandmother was a cosmetologist, and her beauty shop was in her garage. And so I spent a lot of time at my grandma's house, obviously with a single dad. I spent a lot of time with grandma, and the beauty shop was right there. But she did Mrs. Richardson's hair. So I knew Mrs. Richardson from really early on as a little kid. So she was very inspirational for me. I also had a senior English teacher who was probably the most difficult teacher I've ever had in my life, even in college. And I hate to write. It is not my forte. I'm actually not horrible at it. I just don't enjoy it. And it's probably maybe one of the few C's I ever made in my entire life, and I was happy to have it. But I credit her to this day for really challenging me, pushing me out of the box. And I don't know that she was really an inspiration for me to be a teacher, but she was absolutely an inspiration for me to be a better writer and know that that was an important skill that I was going to need through college and really throughout my lifetime.
So it sounds like that might have been one of your least favorite subjects.
Absolutely.
So what was your favorite?
Mathematics is probably my favorite, or PE. I absolutely love sports. So, but academically, mathematics for sure.
Awesome. So being a superintendent of one of the top districts in our country is certainly a formidable task. And you came into leadership at a time with COVID. So you layer that in, and I don't know that any of the lessons that you could have learned, whether that was academically or in any of your other experiences, could have prepared anyone really adequately for that. So talk a little bit about some of the highlights of your professional career that have really helped you get to the point where you are now, that you think have been most informative for the step that you're now
I think people are the most informative to land me where I am today. So throughout my career, I taught 1 year in Duncan, Oklahoma, and then came to Kansas. I wasn't certified, so in Kansas, so I spent a year as a paraprofessional in the Turner School District. They hired me as a special education teacher as soon as I had that certification piece completed for Kansas. And then I spent 23 years there, and I will tell you, I had amazing mentors, whether that was someone in the classroom next to me or leaders, right? Whether it was an assistant principal, superintendents that came and went throughout my time there. But without people, I would not be where I am today. And so when I talk about leaders, you learn good and bad things from leaders. So I had leaders that I was like, oh, I want to be just like them. And quite frankly, I had leaders that I said, I learned a lot from them, and it was the things that I didn't necessarily want to do. So without those people in my lives, I wouldn't be here today.
What were some of the really exceptional things that you took away from those great leaders that you really try to instill now, not just for yourself, but for your team to emulate?
Yeah, I think the value of relationships, and Kevin mentioned that, but that is so very important to me, not only in my professional life, but in my personal life as well. And I think being present in the moment, and there's this old saying, I always mess up when I say it, but people aren't going to remember what you did, but people are going to remember how you treated them and how you made them feel. And so I always try to put myself in other people's shoes, especially when I have to have really tough conversations, and have where they can walk out of the room with some dignity and whatever the case may be. We've faced some unbelievably challenging times over the last 2 years, and people right now, I think, need to know we know how they feel. Classroom is a tough place to be. And so I want teachers to know that we know how they feel. I don't know what it's like to be a teacher right now during COVID. I can only imagine what that's like, but I like to spend time in classrooms right now to know how they're feeling and listen to them. Can't always give them the answers that they want, but we try to listen. And when I say we are a collective team, and that is extremely important to me. Probably one of the most valuable lessons that I learned early in my career. I would try to do things myself. I'm a perfectionist and a little bit of a control freak, but I know early on that I can't do this job by myself. And so delegation is the other very, very important, and having a team that you can trust, that you can delegate and say, these are the things that we're going to do. Let's divide and conquer, and let's figure out how to get the job done.
Talk a little bit about your team and how you're developing them, and how you make sure that you've got that culture of camaraderie, but trust, because the district is huge, and it's spread out over a number of different buildings. And so how do you build that cohesiveness, and especially in a time when people feel really remote and a little bit disconnected?
Well, I feel very fortunate that I've been in the system 6 years before I became a leader, because I know so many people, and I have so many of those relationships already built. And so that was extremely helpful. And so with the exception of one member of the executive leadership team I had worked with previously in the past 6 years. So we did add one new team member from Blue Valley, Mr. David Stubblefield, and he's been an awesome contribution to our team. But I think knowing them individually, and then knowing personalities, knowing strengths, knowing potential weaknesses, and we all have them, right? And so I know what my weaknesses are, and so I try to bring people beside me that can help with those weaknesses. And I think the most important thing that executive leadership team right now can do is to stay positive, and that's something we've talked about all year. But again, it's tough to be in schools right now, right? And so, and if people follow us, and so if we're not positive, then it impacts the culture around us. So last year, when I knew I was going to be the superintendent, one of the very first things I did is I purchased a book, and that's the name of it, Stay Positive. And it literally is a book of hundreds of positive quotes. And so I went and met with them each individually. I talked to them about the importance of staying positive for our teachers, for our, our custodial staff, our food service staff, everybody. They watch us and they follow us. And so just this week, it was so powerful for me. It's been a rough week, right? It's election week. It's leading up to the election has been tough. People are tired right now. Everyone's needing a break. And so it's been a rough week. And I had a team member, not on my executive leadership team, that came to see me. I was in my office. My secretary said, this person is looking for you. So I called him back and she said to me, I didn't need anything. I just came down with my book of John. And I said, book of John? What are you talking about? She goes, it's a verse from the book of John. And I said, what's the book of John? And she had the Stay Positive book in her hand. And the author is John Gordon. And that's what they call it. So in their team meetings, they're always talking about, let's pull out something from the book of John. And so that's what she was referencing. And she goes, I just could tell this week that you might need something from the book of John. And so it's kind of ingrained with that leadership team, which is great. And I also was great that they saw that I needed to be picked up. And so it's a team concept and it takes all of us to do that.
It's wonderful. A lot of leaders, when they're coming into a position, or even sometimes when they're being interviewed for a position, someone asks, what's your 90-day plan or what's your 100-day plan? And so, you're about at that 120-day area. So, did you have a specific plan for 90 or 100 days? And if so, what did that look like?
So I feel like deja vu a little bit because I interviewed for the superintendent job in this room about in the same spot. To be totally honest, there was a big square and I was sitting right here. So as part of that interview process, we were asked to have I don't even remember, a 60-day plan, 90 plan or something, but I actually looked at the whole year because I thought it was important to look at the whole year. And so yes, I have a full year transition plan. And when I shouldn't even say we do, our team does, because when I interviewed for this job, I said, I have developed this plan, but I put draft all over the plan because I wanted to surround my team around that plan and say, what did I miss? What did I get wrong? So let's adjust it. And so we took the plan and we reference it pretty regularly. I just had my first evaluation with the board and I referenced that plan and I went through that plan and I said, what did I do? What did I not do? And so that plan drives our work. And so there were really 5 guiding principles, 4 to 5 guiding principles. 2 of them are pretty close in nature, but championing the strategic plan, that was first and foremost for us in regards to, we wanted to make sure that strategic plan is important to our community and we wanted to make sure it followed that plan. And really working on building a team with the board, working on the culture of the district, and developing positive relationships, and then continuing to build high-functioning leadership teams. And that doesn't necessarily mean principals. That means all leadership teams. We have leaders in our buildings, leaders on our custodial staff, leaders everywhere in the system, so to continue to build that capacity.
So do you feel like your teams are able to articulate that plan and know where they are, benchmarking, et cetera?
So the executive leadership team is absolutely able to reference that plan. Absolutely.
Wonderful. One of the things at the chamber that we hear from our employers every single day is their #1 need is for talent. And this predates COVID. Certainly COVID has exacerbated that need, the war on talent and people wondering where are all the people, where are the workers? But even prior to that, everyone was concerned about sustainability, with 10,000 baby boomers retiring every single day. How are we making sure that we are training that workforce for the future? And so how is the district working with the employers to make sure that our curriculum is relevant, that we have those partnerships that Kevin referenced, that you believe are so important? How are we making sure that there's synergy between the business community and the district as we move forward?
So we just embarked on a grant with the Kaufman Foundation around real world learning. And right now it's really focused on high schoolers, but in our plan, we have a plan to bring that down all the way through kindergarten and even pre-K for that matter. But that grant focuses on getting kids by 2030, every high school student to graduate from high school with a market value asset. So the next question that always comes is, what is a market value asset? So Kaufman has really defined that work around kids will graduate with maybe an industry recognized credential. So maybe they'll walk out of high school with a CNA or a welding certificate or something that can get them immediately walking into the workforce. Internships, client-based projects. That's another one sometimes are like, define that for me. So maybe a small business in the community doesn't have a marketing team and they want to rebrand a logo or they want a marketing plan. So that is something that they could reach out to the school system, and we have a new position that is a liaison between business and schools and say, hey, I really need this marketing plan. You have a high school marketing team that can do this for us. And so the pitch would go to the high school. And so maybe it might be 6 groups of 4 kids that would create in this one classroom that would create a marketing plan. The employer would come in, the 6 kids would pitch their idea, if you will, and then the employer, part of a client-based project, one of the main criteria is the employer must give feedback to the kids, both positive and negative, so that it is truly a learning experience. And so that right now is our best way to connect to business, and we're really excited about that. We've been sharing that with all the chambers in the area. We've been hosting our employers in to hear the pitch around this real world learning idea. And then the other market value asset is a college credit, because this really is for kids that are going to college or going to the career. I mean, we want kids to be prepared regardless of what their path is once they walk out of Shawnee Mission. So we're really excited about that work. Last year, I believe, I have the data in front of me, but I believe we had about 32% of our high school kids that walked out with a high school diploma and a market value asset. Again, our goal is by 2030, every high school kid walks out.
That's awesome. So how can, you know, our audience and those who will watch this, it's recorded and so it will live on our website. So how can an employer engage with that, you know, if they haven't already?
Right. So to be completely honest, we're still working on this. We're a really large system, and not only is it us, but Blue Valley's engaged, Olathe is engaged. And so all of these employers are probably going to get bombarded from us. But we have hired a position that just began this year. The first 2 years, our grant is paying for this position. And then after that, we're so fortunate the Shawnee Mission Education Foundation has agreed to pick up the position. So it's not a burden on the system. It's not a position in the system. So it's called a B2E, Business to Education Liaison. Laura Harsh is in that position for us. And right now, if someone came to me and said, hey, I want an internship, I'm going to give you a real example that happened just recently. So H&R Block, I happen to know a lady in HR there. She called me and she goes, Michelle, we're really, really struggling. And I am scared to death that come January, tax season's going to hit. And we are so short-staffed. Any chance you might have some high school kids that could work after school for us, you know, even maybe remotely, like scheduling appointments, or we have a lot of jobs that we just can't fill. And I said, well, I might even be able to do better than that. And so long story short, I believe we have 8 kids that are going to be starting the second semester with H&R Block. That will, half of them will do morning schedules, half of them will do afternoon schedules. So they're actually filling the position for H&R Block. And those kids are being paid, and H&R Block is paying them fairly well. And so at the same time, they're getting the experience, they're getting paid, and they're getting high school credit for doing that.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah. So we don't have a rate. We piloted some software last year where it sort of worked like a bulletin board. Like company ABC would go in and say, I'm putting this on the bulletin board. I need this. And then the school would say, oh, we have this group of kids at Shawnee Mission Northwest that can pick up that job. The system, the software that we piloted could not handle us. It was not ready for 5 very large high schools. And so I keep saying, jokingly, but maybe not so much, we need a high school kid to build us a platform to be able to do this. But we're working on that, and with the help of Kaufman, we're not working on it alone. Kaufman is really engaged in that work, and all the high schools are saying that, right? All the school systems are saying that, and so we're still working on a solution for that. But right now, we're handling it through Laura Harsh at the district.
Wow, that is wonderful. I mean, we're used to kind of these one-off solutions, but if you can do that in a systemic way, then I think we can make real progress.
Right.
Because we have to make sure that all students have a really great opportunity of finding their path. You found your path early and passion, and the sooner we can get students to have an opportunity to learn what businesses do. You've got a lot of different businesses represented in this room, and for the most part, students understand a couple of pathways. They don't have any idea that there are all of these different kinds of businesses, and within these businesses, lots of different kinds of jobs. And it's only by partnering together that we can help them explore all of these different pathways.
Well, I think that's the beauty of it. We talk a lot about this. There are jobs out there that kids don't even know exist. Right. And so we're doing some career exploration, some interest surveys with our really starting as early as 6th grade. But this Kaufman grant really is taking the work down through, as I said, pre-kindergarten. And I was able to, before the pandemic, tour many schools, Washington, California, which several in Chicago area, that were doing this really, really well at the elementary level. And so we're just now in the part of our strategic plan where we're piloting at our elementary school, and it's barely off the ground. So I believe we have 8 to 10 elementary schools doing some pilot work. So we want it at that level too, so that kids know what their options are. I mean, I don't know about you, but in my early, we didn't have very many options. I mean, it was like, you do this, this, or this. So,
everybody did the same thing.
right.
And I'm older, so it was, you were either in the fast or the slow group. I mean, that's what we called them. So it wasn't very affirming back then. So yeah, I think it's wonderful. The more we can all work together, to try to partner is wonderful. So to kind of build on that, I think in Johnson County, we're really used to, we're the best. Our school districts are the best, our schools are the best. And, I think we have to really work at making sure that we don't just take that for granted. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about your vision overall for the district, not just, now or in 2 to 5 years, but, setting that pace so that, we are the best at whatever the best looks like, 10, 20, 30 years from now. And so, can you share a little bit about what those elements of the strategic plan are actually building toward?
So I wish I had a crystal ball to know what the best was, because I am extremely competitive. Those people that know me really well know this about me, and so I absolutely want to be the best. But more importantly, I want the best for every single kid. And that's not always easy, right? I mean, and I would say that in Johnson County, our schools really do set the bar very high for being the best. But I'm not sure, and I'll speak for us personally in Shawnee Mission, I'm not sure we've been the best at reaching every single kid. So that's the beauty of our strategic plan, in my opinion. There is this, it is written to ensure that all kids, it doesn't matter how bright you are or how many challenges you may bring or what your home life looks like, it really doesn't matter. We are about each and every kid in that plan, and that is the beauty of our strategic plan. And, it is a 5-year plan, but when we talked about it, we really talked about this, 30 years down the road and ensuring that all kids have the ability to be successful. So we've been, quite frankly, criticized for our work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we want to make sure all kids have a sense of belonging. And so we want to make sure that when kids walk into a room or in a cafeteria full of 500 other kids, or Friday night on the football field, that they have a sense of belonging. Because if we feel like we belong somewhere, then we're going to be successful. And that's the goal. Right?
Well, I think those were the really the overarching principles that we heard during Forward OP, back in 2017, 2018, when we held all of those community town halls. whether it was a small group or a large group, the one thing that we heard every single time we met with a group of people was that what they wanted was for us to be a welcoming community. You know, and some groups felt that we were, and some groups felt that we weren't, but they all agreed that that's what they wanted us to be, was a welcoming community. And so what you're talking about really is a different definition of excellence and a different definition of best. And communicating that and making sure that everyone in the community understands that that's the goal is going to be the challenge, to make sure that everyone understands that the goal that we're competing for, looks just a little bit different than it did in the past. It's not just about ACT scores or certain grades or whatever.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's where I was headed, because we are, and unfortunately, we're often judged on test scores. If you would have judged me on test scores, I wouldn't be sitting where I am today. And so I was not a good test taker. I did very well academically, but not taking tests. And so I think really, I appreciate the Kansas accreditation system, because it does look at more than just test scores. And so I'm excited about that. Our strategic plan definitely has aspects of it. I'm calling it a portfolio, where we have artifacts, if you will, where kids can show their work. An internship, it is so powerful to have an internship. Let's talk. It doesn't matter really where you are. You're going to learn good and bad leadership, right? You're going to learn good and bad skills. And so, the one thing I would challenge our community on, and it's hard because when we went to school, this is the way we went to school. It worked for me. It should work for our kids, and it was pretty black and white. Let's be honest. It was very like it was this or this, and it's not just about test scores. Kids are doing amazing work. Kids are doing really amazing work in our high schools, really all the way through our schools, but you really see it in high school.
Well, I think it's part of all of our responsibility is to make sure that we're communicating that story, and the business media, I think, can share in that as well. So part of that communication, I think, is the narrative that we're hearing that COVID has really impacted the performance of our students. And so let's talk about that for a few minutes, and I'd like to get your perspective on how COVID has impacted students. Start with academically, but I know that the mental health piece certainly is a concern, so we can talk about that next as well.
So academically, we had, I'm sure everyone has heard about federal dollars called ESSER dollars. And so we put together 3 different teams, an elementary, middle, and a high school team. And we said, let's look at our data, and not just academics, but also attendance data, discipline data, all the things that really tell us a story about what's happening in the classroom, whether it was a virtual classroom or an in-person classroom. And those teams really dug into the data, and what we found was, especially in the area of English language arts, we were really pretty flat. We didn't have no spike, but we definitely didn't really lose anything either. And we sort of chalk that up to a lot of kids probably read more than they've ever read in their life, right? They're stuck at home, and that's something parents can say, oh, well, let's read a book or go read, where mathematics, not the case. We saw a significant decline in the area of mathematics, and I think that's because that instruction, that daily instruction, is so very important. And it's hard for some parents to teach mathematics to their kids, especially as the stakes get higher in mathematics. So those teams put together a plan in regards to all of those areas. ELA, because we don't want flat, right? We want to move kids forward. Mathematics, we hired additional math teachers. So definitely the pandemic, I think, has impacted mathematics. We have work to do. And then social emotion, we are seeing right now kids back in school full time. Probably that's our biggest challenge. To be real honest with you, it's a bigger challenge than academics for us, and the trauma is real, and it still is for many. Maybe they've lost loved ones due to COVID, lost jobs. Parents have lost jobs, or whatever the case may be. whatever the story is, and there are a lot of different ones. I had to move and live with grandma. I had to move state to state. So our teachers are really faced with a lot of challenging behaviors, and not necessarily outward. Some are outward, definitely, but definitely inward too. Just really getting to kids and knowing kids individually. And in addition to that, I would tell you the same holds true for our staff. So many staff members are having those same struggles for whatever reason, whatever their story is. And so I think that's been the biggest challenge. And this year is more difficult. For whatever reason, this year seems to be a lot more difficult. We also have kids back in school that haven't been in school for 18 months. So I've toured the Growing Futures facility, the Head Start facility this morning for our area. And it was so amazing to me, the 3-year-olds that walked over, put their mask on. They did not necessarily, like, that's just what they did. And then I said to the person standing next to me, this is all they know. If you think about a 3-year-old or even a 5-year-old, this is the only world they know. And so it's just different. It's very different, and it's tough.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, you all were one of the districts leading the effort to get Zero Reasons Why started. So, I think that attention early on, before the pandemic ever started, you were already looking for signs, your teachers, your counselors, your principals, anyone in the building, I think, was already alerted to notice signs that there might be something different about a child. And so you already knew to look out for those things. But I think you're right. This year is harder. It definitely is.
Also, part of our ESSER funds, I should have mentioned, we added additional social workers to ensure every building had a really clinical social worker. In some cases, they have more than that, or they have counselors, but now every single school has social workers. We have an amazing student services team that really wraps around when individuals or groups of individuals need support.
Glad to hear that. So you talked a little bit about DEI, and so I know that there's been some people who really embrace that, other people who may not. Talk a little bit about what those goals are, what they mean, and how you're addressing trying to enhance that within the district.
So the strategic plan work all talks about being relentless to provide an inclusive culture, whether that's around race, whether that's around identity, special education needs. We want all kids to feel included, and that sense of belonging that I talked about earlier. So we're doing that in a variety of ways, but even facilities, our facilities are happening in our facilities to ensure privacy for all, regardless of what your story is or what your situation is. There's going to be ability, so restrooms that provide privacy for all. It's not happening immediately, but it's coming this year. That was part of the work that we're doing there. We've done deep equity training for our teachers, which is really around being culturally responsive in the classroom. And so just understanding where kids are coming from, the things that we say. Again, we want people to feel like they belong. If I, as a teacher, say something to offend somebody and I don't even know it, then I immediately shut a kid down, and I don't even know that happened. So I actually spent about 4 hours today in equity training myself. I was able to sit with Trowwood Elementary, and finding that sense of belonging for everybody, kids, staff, and everyone that comes to their schools.
Intentionality rather than just words in a strategic plan.
I just, for the record, I put on record, we do not teach critical race theory. That is a college course. It's college content. That is not what we're doing.
Thank you. Appreciate that clarification. I want to dig in just a little bit more on the personal side.
Okay.
We spent a little bit of time on the district, and so I want to ask about if there's a singular achievement that you have. You've talked a lot about your team, and I think that makes the great leader that you are. But is there anything as you look back in your career that you think, that's the thing, that's why I do what I do, because I'm really proud of that.
I don't know that I have one thing, but the one thing that probably keeps me going year after year after year is high school graduation. So I'm really happy. It was one of the circumstances. Sorry if I tear up. I tear up. And even if I don't know the kids, it doesn't matter. It's just it's just that accomplishment and how I've been so fortunate to be able to stand on the stage and hand over 20 years of diplomas out. And just the excitement and the energy around that, and knowing what I know about their futures, and that they have no idea what's coming, right? Because we've lived it, we've been there, and just to see kids walk across that stage year after year, it keeps me going. As far as personal accomplishments for me, it was finishing my doctorate. That is something that I was the first person in my family to do that. I was the first person in my family to have a master's degree, but then my doctorate piece was it was just so important to me, and it was important to my dad. And he really hates to travel. We're 7 hours apart, and he's like, he always just tell me, I'd be like, when are you going to come up? And he would say, when you finish your doctorate. That's like 2 years away. And he would come, but that was always sort of the joke. But that, just the look on his face when I did that. And, for me, that was something that was really important to me, and I was very driven to do.
Oh, I bet he wasn't proud. So to use the sports analogy, how about a mulligan? Is there a particular moment in time where you wish, wow, I could go back, I would do that completely differently?
There is one scenario where I made a really huge mistake, and I wish I could take it back. So I was an elementary principal for 2 years, and I loved that community dearly. And I think they would tell you that they loved me. Like, we were just very, very connected. And then several years later, when I became the superintendent, it was a horrible budget year in Kansas, and we had to close that school. And so here I was this principal that they really liked, and I had to tell them, sorry, your school's going away. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And I made a big mistake in communication. And the kids received the information before the parents. And it wasn't intentional, but it should have been intentional that didn't happen on my part. And it is the one thing that still to this day haunts me. Boundary changes are hard, school closures are hard, and it's so very personal for each individual person in that scenario. And that is the one mistake that I made.
So does that kind of live in the back of your mind every time you get ready to communicate something major?
It does.
To really think through that process?
Absolutely. Especially in situations, we've done, in my time in Shawnee Mission, we've done 2 boundary change. One was tiny, one impacted 13 schools. I mean, it took a huge toll on me because nobody wants to move schools ever, right? And we're looking at one in the future. We're going to have one here in the near future. And so really processing through that, and it's never easy, and no one's ever going to be happy usually. And so if you can just do it as seamlessly as possible, that's my goal.
So I have a niece who is doing her student teaching right now. She's teaching 2nd grade, and it's like a light just lit up in her whole body when she figured out that she wanted to be a teacher, because she was going down a different path. She thought she wanted to be a nurse, and I think there were a couple of science classes that changed her mind. But when she figured out her path and she changed her mind and she got where she was supposed to be, whenever she called me, I could tell this is the path for her, and she loves it. And so if you were to talk with her, to give her advice, in the middle of this student teaching experience before she's getting ready to go out and find, the first real job, what would you say to her?
Well, the first thing I would tell her is the most amazing place to teach is Shawnee Mission. And we would love to hire her.
Get that certification in Kansas.
That's
instead of
right.
Missouri.
That's right. That's right. We would love to hire her. So that's first. The most important advice that I can give to new teachers is to find the teachers in your building. When you have that first job, when you've landed it, you find the teachers in that building that still love their job and can tell you that they love it because of kids. Because in every school, in every grocery store, in every architecture firm, people love their job and people hate their job for whatever reason, right? I mean, I'm just not happy with my job, or I love it and I'm passionate and this is why. Tell her to surround herself with the people that love their job and are still passionate about kids.
Oh, that's wonderful advice. So, absolutely. I'll probably actually just make her watch this part. Perfect advice. So, we've heard about the years where you probably didn't sleep at all, when you had 5 kids, under the age of 6 and a blended family. So talk a little bit about what's more challenging, those early years, managing a school district during COVID, or all of these kids in college at the same time.
So I do have 5 of my own, 6 and under, and then with a blended family, I've added 3 more, so there's 8 actually. We call them the crazy 8. We do have 6 in college right now, 1 out, and then a junior in high school. So what is the most difficult? For me, elementary school with the 5 littles and being both a high school principal at that time and the superintendent, most of that time was those things were happening. By far was the hardest for me, even more hard than COVID, because I struggled with the balance and I wanted to be perfect at both. And I mean, I have one of my really good friends is in the same scenario. She doesn't quite have as many kids as I do, but we joke about who's the biggest loser mom. Like, that was a loser mom moment, right? Or I should have been better at that, or it was hard to balance homework, night events, driving to soccer practice, basketball practice, whatever it was, music lessons, to balance all of that and balance the job. My kids are I called them gym rats because they spent so much time as elementary kids in a gym somewhere, sometimes doing homework, so those were the moments where like, God, this is such a loser mom moment, but we got it done and they're all very successful, so they made it out okay.
I'm not even sure how you fed them. I mean, when did you have time to go to the grocery store and make food?
So that is something I was
enough hours in the day.
I was extremely organized. That's probably one of my greatest strengths. So everybody had their own color-coded laundry baskets. Your laundry went in, you took your laundry. I did all my cooking on Sunday for the week, and it was very organized. This is what we're going to do. Usually one of those nights were probably McDonald's or wherever else, but yeah, I had to be extremely organized to make it happen.
It might feel like vacation right now, since you're not doing that.
I've had to learn, people laugh when I say this, but I've had to relearn how to grocery shop, because we would go through a gallon of milk and, well, 2 or 3 for a week in some cases. And now I'm pouring milk out all the time, and that never happened in my life. So I'm really struggling with how to balance that. And then they'll come home for a weekend and they'll be like, there is no food in this house, because it's only me. It's only us. So yeah.
Wow. That is absolutely amazing. Talk a little bit about what you wish you had known when you were young, Michelle. Stars in your eyes, pomp and circumstance, like those high school students who have no idea what's ahead of them. And, the world's your oyster. What would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself to stop and enjoy the moment more often. When you say I can't imagine what it's like, to be honest, I don't remember what those first 5 years were like. It's such a blur, and I know that I didn't take time to stop and enjoy the moment. And that is something that I talked to new teachers about this year, about finding balance and being great at home also, because you need to be great at home before you can be great in your classroom. And so I was not very good I wish I could go back before I was a mom, before I was a high school principal, before I was a superintendent, and say, you know what, all this will still be here tomorrow morning. You don't have to do it all tonight. You need to enjoy. This is something I'm saying to my principals regularly. Enjoy and focus on what you get to do and not what you have to do. So that is what I would say.
Great advice. I think that's a perfect ending point. I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing that with both of our audiences today. More than anything, I want to thank you for your leadership of the Shawnee Mission School District, for everything that you've already done for the past 6 years. I mean, you've been in our county for a while and you've done an amazing job. And I know that you've got many more years to contribute and to lead us and to show us how to be better.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
We're so glad to have you. And so thank you all for joining us here today for this fireside chat. And I want to thank once again Kevin Hanemichael and BHC Roads for being our sponsor of the Fireside Chat Series. This is recorded and will be on our website in the next couple of days. And so please share this with your friends. This was truly inspirational and I think a great opportunity for others to learn more about our great educational system and how we as business people can be supportive and also help with making sure that we have the best workforce for the future. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you for coming.